On America's Most Wanted in 1999, they put up Kenneth Williams' face and offered a reward worth over $105,000 in today's money for information leading to his capture. They connected him to 15 murders. They told the country he was armed and dangerous and on the run. He was caught 9 months later in a suburb in Georgia, driving alone, unarmed, under a fake name. When the U.S. Marshals pulled him over, he told them exactly who he was without any resistance. No shootout, no standoff, no last desperate play. Just a man who had been living on borrowed time for years, finally meeting the end of it. His name was Kenneth Williams. They called him Boobie. And by the time those handcuffs clicked shut, the city of Miami had spent a decade living in fear of him. 5 tons of cocaine, an $80 million empire, 25 Florida cities and 12 states, 35 murders, over 100 shootings, a 5-year gang war that left 62 people dead. Residents of Liberty City and Overtown and Carroll City too scared to sit on their own front porches after dark. A 5-year-old boy named Michael Frazier killed in a parking lot because he happened to be sitting on his mother's lap when the ski mask came out. That was the Booby Boys. That was what Kenneth Williams built from the streets of one of the most abandoned neighborhoods in America. And before he was any of those things, before he was the subject of federal indictments and America's Most Wanted segments and Rick Ross lyrics, he was a teenager in Liberty City watching Cadillacs roll by and deciding that one day one of those cars was going to be his. In the summer of 1987, in the streets of Miami, a teenage boy named Kenneth Williams was riding in a car with his friends when they spotted 3 boys standing on a corner. They stopped the car, they got out, and then they did the unthinkable. 2 of the boys were hit and survived. The 3rd boy, a kid named Gary, didn't make it. The 2 survivors told law enforcement exactly who pulled the trigger. Kenneth was charged with 1 count of first-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. He pled guilty to lesser charges and was sent to a juvenile detention center. He was still a teenager. That was the beginning. And if you think that's where the story ends or where the lessons were learned, you don't know Kenneth Williams. You don't know what Liberty City does to you. You don't know what Miami in the 1980s was. And you definitely don't know what it means to come of age in a world where the only men driving Cadillacs are the ones willing to do exactly what Kenneth Williams did on that corner in 1987. This is the story of how a boy from the Matchbox projects grew into the most feared drug kingpin Miami had ever seen from its own streets. How he built a cocaine empire worth $80 million, moved more than 5 tons of product through Panama and the Bahamas into 25 cities across 12 states, and left a trail of bodies on the streets of Miami-Dade County that the newspapers would eventually call a decade of death. How he went to war with the Kingpin, just as ruthless as he was, fought that war for 5 straight years and took the whole city down with him. And how in the year 2000, a federal jury convicted him of it all and sent him to prison for the rest of his life. To understand Kenneth Williams, you have to understand where he came from. Liberty City in the 1970s and 1980s was not just a poor neighborhood. It was a neighborhood that had been deliberately cut off from the rest of Miami. When the city built Interstate 95 in the early 1960s, it ran the highway straight through Overtown, the heart of Black Miami, and displaced thousands of families into Liberty City. They packed them in and left them there. The housing deteriorated. The jobs didn't come. The schools were underfunded. And by the time crack cocaine arrived in the early 1980s, Liberty City was sitting on top of a powder keg with no relief in sight. Here is what the data said about that city. Miami was responsible for trafficking an estimated 70% of the country's cocaine supply by 1981. The money flooding through the city was so massive, so overwhelming, that bank officials discovered what they called suitcase banking, where a full suitcase stuffed with 20s could hold $500,000, and deposits like that were being made every single day. The Colombian cocaine cowboys were operating openly. The Medellin cartel had established roots through the Bahamas and directly into Miami. The city was, by any honest measure, the drug capital of the United States. And Liberty City, according to researchers who studied the crack epidemic, had the highest crack cocaine index in the entire country for over a decade. That was the world Kenneth Williams was growing up in. And you want to be surprised that he ended up the way he did? After he was sent to juvenile detention for what happened to Gary, Kenneth Williams met a boy named Casado. Both of them were fatherless. Both of them were violent. Both of them had already made a certain kind of peace with what the streets required. Over the next few years, they developed a friendship behind bars, the kind that gets forged in places where trust is the only currency that matters. When Kenneth got out sometime around 1991, he had made up his mind. He was going to live a life of crime and accept whatever punishment came with it. That was the decision. He made it clearly, and he never went back on it. By the time he hit the streets, Miami's drug trade had evolved. The powder that had made the cocaine cowboys rich was now being cooked into crack, cheap enough for anyone to buy and addictive enough to build an empire on. Kenneth started building his. He connected with a man named Charles, a longshoreman who worked at the port of Miami. Charles was deep in the smuggling game. He used fake passports to fly overseas and cut deals with producers in Central and South America. The product would move from the source to the Bahamas and then into Miami, fresh off the boat, right through the port where Charles worked. From there, the Booby Boys flooded the streets of 25 Florida cities and 12 states with it. That was the infrastructure, and it was built by men who understood that the port of Miami wasn't just a gateway for tourist cruises and shipping containers. It was the most valuable piece of real estate in the entire American drug trade. Having a man on the inside was the difference between running a street operation and running an empire. In 1992, Kenneth hooked up with Casado again on the outside. The two men had been running their own independent distribution networks, each of them already serious players. They recognized something in each other that they had been missing separately: scale. When they combined forces, the organization that would eventually be called the Booby Boys was born. Not a gang with colors and hand signals and an initiation ritual. Something looser and more dangerous than that. A network of men connected by loyalty to Kenneth, by friendship with Casado, by shared neighborhoods and shared histories, and the shared understanding that anyone who crossed the organization would pay for it in blood. The name came from the streets. People called Kenneth Boobie. The media ran with it, and the Booby Boys became the name attached to everything that followed. That same year, 1992, Kenneth was at a club called Club Rolex when he locked eyes with a man from the rival Thomas gang in the parking lot. He pulled out his weapon. It jammed. The man he was trying to shoot was also about that life, so he returned the favor. Kenneth got hit. He survived. The responding officer later said he always thought it was strange that the victim didn't want to cooperate. But what that officer didn't understand was that the victim wasn't just some random man who got caught in something. Kenneth Williams was already a general, and generals don't talk to police. They handle it themselves. What happened over the next several years was a campaign of violence so relentless, so brazen, and so devastating that the Miami-Dade Police Department would eventually link more than 35 murders and over 100 shootings to the Booby Boys across an 8-year period beginning in 1993. Newspapers called it a decade of death. Retired Metro-Dade detective Tony Monheim, who spent years investigating the gang and later wrote a book about it, put it plainly. The Booby Boys used AK-47 assault rifles in drive-by shootings with the intention of killing off the competition. They created a terror wave in Miami for much of the 1990s. That's not a figure of speech. That's a description of what it was like to live in Liberty City and Overtown and Carroll City during those years. Guns blasting every night, bodies dropping, innocent people afraid to sit on their own porches after dark. A city held hostage by two criminal organizations that had decided Miami's drug market wasn't big enough for both of them. On Christmas Day in 1993, a Vonda's gang associate named James was shot and killed right in front of the home of the rival boss. That was the Booby Boys sending a message. On the last day of 1993, members of the Thomas gang spotted members of the Booby Boys at a gas station, and the shooting started. When it was over, 2 completely innocent men were dead. An accountant minding his own business, a man from Queens, New York, visiting family for the holidays and buying lottery tickets. Neither one of them had anything to do with anything. They were just in the wrong place when the streets decided to settle a score. The violence had a rhythm to it. The Thomas gang drove by a barbershop where some of the Booby Boys associates were getting cuts and let off 90 rounds from an assault rifle. A man named Duke and a man named Johnny were hit. Johnny survived, Duke didn't. Less than 24 hours later, the Booby Boys had found a Thomas gang member named Benny. They hit him. He tried to run. He fell to the ground. They walked up on him while he was laying on the concrete and finished the job. He didn't make it, but they made a mistake. When they left the scene, they left behind a beeper, an electronic pager with phone numbers stored in it. Investigators called every number in that beeper. One of the people who answered was connected to a man named Rogers. And just like that, Rogers and his associates became the prime suspects. The Booby Boys had been meticulous about everything else, but they left a beeper at a murder scene, and that beeper started unraveling things. Before the rapper, Trina was a star. Back in her high school days, she was dating a young man named Derek. Derek happened to be the brother of the future rapper, Trick Daddy. On a sunny day in June, Derek took Trina out on a date, dropped her off, and then went to handle some business with his friend Walter. She went to bed. The next morning, she woke up to the news that at 1:30 in the morning in Opelika, 2 men had been found inside a car, Derek and Walter. Both of them had been hit more than 50 times with an assault rifle. They were gone. Walter's mother and Derek's father both testified about what they knew. Before that night, their sons had been living in fear. They knew Kenneth was plotting to remove them. They had told people. They had been afraid. And those fears turned out to be completely justified. An associate of the Booby Boys testified that the shooting was retaliation for what happened at the barbershop where Duke and Johnny got hit. Derek and Walter were the answer to that. A neighbor who saw what happened gave investigators the play-by-play. The first car chased Derek and Walter down, but crashed. A second car pulled up. 2 men got out, unloaded on the victims, got back in the car, and left. The neighbor walked over to the car and saw what was inside, then called the police. The neighbor identified 2 members of the Booby Boys as the shooters. It was another data point in a case that was building slowly against an organization that had made itself nearly impossible to prosecute through the ordinary means available to state courts. The most chilling incident of the entire war happened at an apartment complex where the Booby Boys hustled. A small-time dealer named Otis had history with the crew. They had exchanged words and gunfire a few months back. So the Booby Boys put money on his head and waited for the right moment. The right moment came when Otis drove into the parking lot and parked. He was in the driver's seat. A woman was in the front passenger seat. Her 5-year-old son, Michael Frazier, was sitting on her lap. Men in ski masks came out of nowhere. They had assault rifles. They used them again and again. Otis was the target. He didn't make it. The woman in the passenger seat was taken to the hospital. She didn't make it. Little Michael, 5 years old, was taken to the hospital with a bullet from an assault rifle stuck in him. 2 days later, he didn't make it either. A man named Pierre was in the back seat. He survived and was able to testify. Investigators who processed the scene collected the shell casings. When they got back to the lab, Some of those casings matched casings from a shooting 8 months earlier at the Blue Lakes Apartments, the one where a blue Lincoln Town car had been seen at the scene. The same gun, different victims, different days, same organization. And then there was Vonda. The part of the Booby Boys story that never fully made the headlines was that for most of their reign, the most dangerous war they were fighting was not against law enforcement. It was against a gang led by a woman, a Kingpin, a Vonda Dowling, known in the streets as Black Girl or just Vonda. She ran Overtown. She had been running it since the mid-1980s. And when investigators started pulling on the thread of Miami's 1990s drug violence, they found her name wrapped around all of it. Retired homicide detective Jeff Lewis was direct about what his unit discovered when they started working the case. When we began investigating the violence in Miami in the 1990s, we discovered a Vonda was at the center of it, he explained. We would bring in informants for questioning and ask them about Black Girl. We soon learned she was worse than Boobie. That is not the kind of thing a homicide detective says lightly. A Vonda Dowling had been commissioning murders since at least 1986. Her first documented hit was a drug dealer named Michael McBride, who had set up shop right around the corner from her operation on 11th and Terrace in Overtown. He was offering better product at lower prices. That was enough. She hired a man named Robert Rah Sawyer to handle it for $10,000 and half a kilo of cocaine. On the night of April 22nd, 1986, McBride was standing on the balcony of his apartment. A single gunshot, problem solved. A Vonda had learned the cocaine business from a gangster named Bunky Brown, and she had learned it well. She ran a drug spot at 11th Terrace and 2nd Avenue Northwest in Overtown that operated like what federal prosecutor David Gardy called the Walgreens of cocaine, open around the clock, stocked with crack and powder, serving both retail customers and dealers who came to re-up. She had 10 to 12 people working for her at any given time. She paid them well. On a good day, a worker could make $15,000 to $20,000. She used cocaine as currency to purchase weapons, specifically AK-47s and MAC-10s. And she had Rah as her enforcer, a man that law enforcement labeled a one-man crime spree, doing things to the faces of rivals that were, in the words of the investigators, too gruesome to describe. By 1993, Vonda's gang and the Booby Boys were at war. The math was simple. Miami's drug market was not big enough for both of them. Vonda controlled Overtown. Kenneth controlled Liberty City and Carroll City and was expanding outward. The territories overlapped. The money was contested, and neither one of them was the type to back down. For 5 years, from 1993 to 1998, the two organizations waged a war that left at least 62 people dead and 36 more wounded. Innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire at gas stations, barber shops, apartment parking lots, a 5-year-old child sitting on his mother's lap in a car. Detective Lewis remembered what it was like. It got to the point that people were afraid to go anywhere. Miamians became prisoners in their own neighborhood. Rah was hunting Booby Boys members on Vonda's orders. The Booby Boys were hunting Vonda's people right back. On one occasion, documented in the investigation, the Booby Boys went to a gas station and killed 2 men connected to Vonda's gang. They had switched cars twice beforehand and burned the second car afterward to destroy evidence. On another occasion, in 1997, police spotted a black car riding through Vonda's territory in Overtown and tried to pull it over for a traffic stop. The driver hit the gas. A car chase started. The people inside started throwing weapons out the windows. When they finally stopped, everyone ran. Kenneth was caught hiding behind a pile of wood. Casado was caught hiding in someone's shower. In the car, investigators found assault rifles, camouflage clothing, and armored vests. They had been on their way to kill Rah. That was the level of preparation. That was what showing up to work looked like for the Booby Boys. The Booby Boys also had police officers on the payroll. That detail tends to get buried under the body count, but it matters. A few cops assigned to the Carroll City District were working for Kenneth and his crew. Their job was to pull over dealers who had just bought product from the Booby Boys, take the drugs and the cash, and let them go. They were robbing the organization's own customers with badges and guns. At one point, a hustler named Ronnie got stopped by one of these officers, who took his bundles of powder and $15,000 in cash and cut him loose with a warning. Ronnie was actually an undercover officer from Internal Affairs, and the report he filed landed on a detective's desk and started an investigation that eventually brought 3 corrupt police officers down on charges that carried 15 to 20-year sentences each. The Booby Boys had corrupted the very apparatus that was supposed to stop them. That tells you something about the depth of the operation and the reach of the organization. This was not just a street gang. This was an enterprise with tentacles in the supply chain, the port, and the police department. By 1998, law enforcement had decided that the state of Florida simply did not have the tools to take the Booby Boys down through ordinary means. The problem was not a lack of evidence. The problem was that the witnesses were terrified. The murders were nearly impossible to prosecute individually because of the difficulty of finding anyone willing to testify, and the organization was too large and too connected to be dismantled one case at a time. So a joint task force was formed, pulling together local police, the FBI, the DEA, and the ATF, and they brought a weapon that no state prosecutor had: RICO. The Racketeer, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations Act allowed the government to charge the entire Booby Boys operation as a single criminal enterprise, binding together every murder, every drug shipment, every firearms charge, and every act of violence into one unified case. This changed everything. Now, the witnesses weren't being asked to testify to a single murder in a state court. Now, the government could flip members of the organization and use their testimony to build a picture of the entire enterprise. And there were plenty of people willing to talk. Associates who had been set up and robbed by the organization's own corrupt cops. Former hustlers serving long sentences who were willing to trade information for time off. Gang members who had been on the losing end of internal disputes and had scores of their own to settle. One by one, through 1998 and 1999, the Booby Boys came off the streets. 15 members arrested here, 30 members arrested there. Vonda was arrested and held while fighting her case from behind bars. Bo Brown, one of the twins, was caught on camera at a market shooting, walking up to 5 men, getting within 3 feet and unloading on all of them. He was arrested. Kenneth went on the run and became a fugitive. His face appeared on America's Most Wanted in 1999, connected to 15 murders. There was a reward valued in today's dollars at over $105,000 for information leading to his capture. On May 17, 1999, the U.S. Marshals caught up with him in a suburb in Georgia. He was driving alone, unarmed, under a fake name. He had been under surveillance for 2 weeks. When they pulled him over, he admitted who he was without resistance. The most feared man in Miami streets went quietly. The trial began in the year 2000. It lasted 31 days. More than 100 witnesses took the stand. More than 30 of those witnesses were convicted felons who had agreed to cooperate with the government in exchange for reduced sentences. Some of them were former members of the Booby Boys. Some were associates who had been robbed by Kenneth's corrupt cop scheme and were now getting their revenge through testimony. Some were jailhouse informants who had been gathering information for years. The Associated Press noted that the jury might need a guidebook just to keep track of the street names, real names, and overlapping roles of every person involved. When it was over, the verdicts were in. Susan Hall Gibson got 30 years. The corrupt cops each got 15 to 20. Vonda got 20. Her top man, Jamal Brown, argued it was unjust she received less than he did after being shot and paralyzed. Casado, Bo Brown, and Kenneth Williams all received life, Williams 3 times over. The rest got life or 30 to 40 years. The organization accounted for more than 600 years behind bars. While the government locked Williams away, Rick Ross took his story national. Born William Leonard Roberts II, Ross grew up in Carroll City, just miles from the Booby Boys. He watched the Cadillacs and the men who drove them. When he made it in music, he turned what he witnessed into a persona. He name-dropped Kenneth Williams constantly, shouted out E4, Casado's nickname, wore Booby Boys t-shirts and videos, and called Williams the most important mentor of his life, comparing the relationship to Larry Hoover and the Gangster Disciples. The dude that initially put me into the music game is Boobie, Ross said. My music touches on his lifestyle. Boobie helped a lot of people in the hood and inspired a lot of positive things. The downside was that he was accused of over 100 homicides and for running a multi-million-dollar drug enterprise. The stuff I talk about is real. Look up Kenneth Boobie Williams. That's not nothing to be proud of, but that's what I witnessed. It's a reality. That quote holds the tension. Williams helped people in his community and ordered the murder of a 5-year-old's mother while the child sat on her lap. He mentored a future superstar and led a war that made 3 Miami neighborhoods afraid to go outside. Both things are true. The legend and the horror came from the same man. Neither Williams nor Vonda Dowling ever recovered their money. Kenneth buried millions in cash. Vonda stashed hers in Tupperware. Nobody ever found it. The federal government never recovered it. Williams remains in federal prison after more than 25 years. He went in his 30s. He is in his 60s now. The empire is gone. The network is scattered. The AK-47s are in evidence. The corrupt cops did their time and got out. Casado and Bo Brown are still in. Vonda served 20 and was released. Rah-Rah got 40. The streets moved on to the next generation with its own wars and young men watching Cadillacs and doing the math. The conditions that built Williams did not leave with him. Liberty City was poor before the Booby Boys, poor while they ran it, and poor after. This is not just a story about one man's choices. It is about what a city produces when it decides certain neighborhoods don't matter. When it builds a highway through a community, packs the displaced into another with no investment, floods the region with more cocaine than any American city in history, and then acts surprised when young men take matters into their own hands. Williams made hard, violent, unforgivable choices. He owns them. The blood is real and no context erases it. But the world that made those choices feel like the only option is still out there, still producing the next Boobie, still watching Cadillacs roll by. That problem didn't get solved when they locked him up. It just got quieter. The Booby Boys also rewired the social geography of the neighborhoods. An 8-year war closes businesses, empties schools, and drives out families who can leave while those who cannot stay behind. Institutions that survived segregation, highway construction, and the 1980s crack wave took another hit they have not fully recovered from. The damaged compounds. The people who paid the highest price were not the men with the AK-47s. Those men died or went to prison. The ones who paid were the residents who had no choice but to raise their children in the aftermath of a war fought in their streets without permission. What do you call a man who grew up in the Matchbox projects, went to juvenile for murder at 16, built a 12-state cocaine network, warred for 5 years with one of Miami's most dangerous gangs, put police on his payroll, moved 5 tons through the port of Miami, appeared on America's Most Wanted, and is serving 3 consecutive life sentences? You call him a product of what Liberty City was and what America decided to let it become. Williams made his choices. The blood is on him. But until somebody reckons honestly with the world that produced him, the next Boobie is already sitting on a porch, watching a Cadillac go by and doing the math.